Hi everyone, welcome to our Mega Vitamin Formula question and answer session with the one and only, the great, the man who changed my life, Andrew Saul.
Well, thank you, Michael, and welcome everyone. I hope you're getting a great deal out of the course, and I hope that we can answer as many good questions as we can today. And I think we're going to answer them all, and I think they're all good. So we're off to a fine start.
Well, there's a couple here going to test you. I've never seen half these things before. But the first one, something I was thinking about only yesterday as I did a little bit of weed killing. I looked at my weed killer to make sure there was no glyphosate in it. And Michelle's question is, what vitamins or supplements might help the body detox from glyphosate?
A timely question and no mistake. And the first thing we need to do is avoid it. And when you, like Michael or me, choose any kind of a garden product, a weed killer, select one that doesn't contain glyphosate. That's the first thing. And then we try to avoid foods that have already been doctored with it. Now, this is getting harder and harder to do because information on this is rarely forthcoming at the point of sale. When you go into the grocery store, when you go into the supermarket, they don't tell you which is and which isn't. So you either have to write to the manufacturer or arrange for a personal tour of the books of the supermarket or the warehouse and check the cartons that the food came in, which again is something that most people probably will not be doing anytime soon. Or you have to simply buy food that's organic. That's the simplest way, because organically grown food will be free or virtually free of glyphosate. So this is one good reason to buy organic food. And to answer your question in a very broad, long-term sense, I think that's really the solution. Just don't take in any more and eat only good organic food. If you can't afford organic food, it's definitely time to have your own garden. I would find it very difficult to buy all the organic squash and all the organic kale that I eat in a year. In fact, I would find it very difficult to even carry it. So to make it simple, if you have a garden and you can grow your vegetables, especially your green leafies, things that are very easy. Kale, leaf lettuce, very, very easy to grow. Spinach, Swiss chard, these things, you scratch a line in the ground, throw in the seed, cover it over, and come back in 4 weeks and you've got food. So it's very simple to do that. If you're in a high-rise or an apartment building, you can try window boxes or potted plants, and you'd be surprised, but you can do it. I know someone who grows oranges and lemons in their dining room. I know a number of people who grow tomatoes on their patio or on their balcony, and you can grow seeds for sprouting right in your kitchen on the counter. Sprouting wheat or lentils or alfalfa or radishes. Cabbage, mung beans. There's a variety of seeds that you can have fresh greens from, even if you live on the 14th floor of a tall apartment building. I think over time, the body will correct this. I think nature will do that. But to more fully answer your specifics, here are some things that you might be able to do. The first thing we need to do is take a look at glyphosate, and the name suggests that somewhere in there, there's glycine. And glycine is an amino acid used by your body to make protein. And you make this. So you make glycine, and with this amino acid and 19 others, you make protein. It's sort of like the blue blocks in your body's Lego set. You have all these different colors and all these different shapes, but if you're a Lego fan like I am, I had probably the first Lego set in the United States of America. Very few people know this and fewer care, but I received my first Lego set when I was a boy from my aunt and uncle who were stationed overseas, in Aruba specifically, which I think is off the coast of Venezuela, former Dutch colony. And my uncle was an officer in the Navy and they were stationed there. Well, they sent me the coolest gifts, such as models that were entirely in Dutch. I had to figure out how to assemble them. And I got my first Lego set. So this is probably 1961. Lego was invented around 1948. Originally, the blocks were wooden. They went to plastic, and then, of course, things really got interesting. I'm telling you all this because analogy can be very, very helpful. When you are a child and you build something with your Lego using the instructions, you're done, you set it aside. But what you can also do is you can take that apart and you can build something else. And this is literally how your body makes protein. It takes amino acids that you might get from eating corn or beef, and it takes that corn or beef protein and breaks it up into its amino acids. That's what digestion does. And then you take those amino acids and you build something else. So it's like taking a Lego car wash that you just built for your cars and taking it apart and building a dollhouse for your sister. Or taking that dinosaur that made out of Lego and taking it apart and building a dog. So the building blocks of protein are amino acids. Glycine is one of those amino acids. Now, what does this have to do with glyphosate? Well, the concern is that this glyphosate is getting in the way, and it is interfering with the normal metabolism that involves glycine and maybe even substituting for it. Now, I'm not an expert in this area, but I think it's instructive to take a look at two reasonably good sources of information, which I've done for you. And one of them is WebMD, which is better than many sites that are somewhat moderately medical, somewhat moderately natural, sort of hovers in the middle, probably more conservative than I would normally want. But when I looked at WebMD, it pointed out that meat and fish and dairy products and legumes, that's peas, beans, and lentils, vegetable sources, are found, glycine is found in them. But if you were to have a normal diet, you would get about 2 grams of glycine a day from food. When people supplement with glycine, and that's one of the recommendations, they would take more than that. Now, Dr. Joe Mercola, who's also a fairly reliable source of this information, I think. I know Joe, I have for years. His site is commercial, but he has an awful lot of good information there. He said, and this is a quote, "To eliminate glyphosate, you need to saturate your body with glycine." And he specifically mentions a teaspoon or 4 grams of glycine powder twice a day for a few weeks, and then lower that to 1 gram or a 1/4 teaspoon twice a day. And he says, this forces the glyphosate out of your system, allowing it to be eliminated through your urine. That's the end of the quote. Now, back to WebMD to see how far off Joe Mercola is in making this recommendation. It turns out he's right on the nose, because even WebMD admits that glycine appears to be safe even at doses up to 9 grams for 3 days. Now, Dr. Mercola recommending grams, 4 grams twice a day for 8 grams for a few weeks. So obviously there's going to be a little bit of a variance here. I have never used glycine as a supplement, but if you're going to, it seems to me that it would be a reasonable thing to try. And at the same time, if you want to know what I personally do, what I personally recommend, at least, for those who aren't going to go out and buy the glycine, is that you have a lot of organic produce and let nature take care of that. And the way to accelerate this, in my opinion, is to have a lot of fresh salads and a lot of vegetable juicing. One more thing to mention, if there were an all-purpose antitoxin, an all-purpose cleansing vitamin, it would be vitamin C. If you've ever gotten to saturation of vitamin C, you know what I mean by that. So that is one of the great ways to detoxify. Now, another thing about glyphosate is that it seems to mess with trace minerals in your body, in your diet. And it's possible that over time, people are going to be trace mineral deficient. And this is already a problem because many people start out by eating a lot of processed foods, which don't have the trace minerals in them. That's why you go back to the garden. That's why you go back to organic, to get those trace minerals. Another criticism of glyphosate is that it disrupts your normal flora, your microbiome, your good bacteria in your alimentary canal. So one of the ways to help with this is to make sure you have cultured foods such as, say, sauerkraut. What is that? Kimchi, is that the Chinese one? And yogurt, kefir. Any of these fermented products will help you get your good colon bacteria back to where they should be. Or you can take a probiotic. So we've covered a whole bunch of things that you can do. One more thing that I would do is not worry about it too much. The good news is Monsanto was nailed and they're paying out lots of money. They were bought by Bayer, and I don't know why Bayer bought them, but I think the board of directors of Bayer is probably saying, oh man, that was dumb. But they are paying out huge amounts of money. I think it's in the billions of dollars in settlements. So they have been caught, and I'm not saying that's justice, but it's at least a bit of justice. So I would recommend that you not worry too much. Move to organic, get your sea level up, and have lots of organic veggies. If you want to spring for the glycine, it's not particularly expensive.
Well, speaking as someone who has enjoyed your produce from your very own garden, but in fact 2 gardens and 2 different houses you've lived in, I have to say to our audience, you grow the best quality veg that I've come across, and your borscht is beautiful. You know, I've said this before, but it's absolutely great.
Well, thank you. For those who are not familiar with it, borscht is beet and cabbage soup. And I can say, and Michael probably would underscore this, it tastes better than it sounds.
And looks, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And I'll throw in another aside, just talking about your childhood and your present from overseas. I was ahead of the game here in Ireland as a 6-year-old when my American auntie sent me a Roy Rogers wallet with an American dollar inside. Imagine that. So Michelle's second question, what vitamins or supplements will help with hyperhidrosis, that is excess sweaty fingers and hands and feet?
I'm not sure. That would be something that you might want to really search for, talk to physicians, see what they say. I don't have a fast answer for that. I have a few ideas though, and I'll share them. In my own life, when I have had that kind of problem, I solved it by wearing sandals a lot in the summer. And I also found that some of it at least was emotional. I used to play violin as a child and actually would play the occasional concert, and once was recorded on an LP record. A record, by the way, is that big flat black thing with the hole in the middle that's played by a needle. So I still have that record. And I remember how nervous I was, and I'm pretty sure that some of the sweaty hands came, of course, rosin. Put on the bow, you just put on hands just like a pool shark, and off you go, and you play the fiddle for your audience. I would suggest here that you take a look at an overall plan that includes making sure you weight. If you're that you probably need to do something differently. I would say increase your exercise, make sure that you're losing the weight. Good weight loss can be only just a pound or 2 a week. You don't have to lose a lot, and beware of people who tell that you do or sell you a product that claims that it will. If you lose 1 pound a week, you might think, oh, gee, that's nothing. Oh, yeah? That's 50 pounds in a year, even with a 2-week vacation. That is a significant accomplishment. And if you can manage 2 pounds a week, whoa, mama, that's 100 pounds in a year. And this is the kind of thing we need to do to make sure we're not missing something obvious. A lot of people are overweight, more than ever, in fact, now after the COVID lockdown. We need to exercise and we need to get our weight down. Good way to do that is with a plant-based diet. Another thing you might do is look into homeopathic remedies. It is possible that you will find one that fits. There isn't a sweaty hands and feet remedy. In homeopathy, they try to match up many of your symptoms, not just one. The simplest way to learn about homeopathy is to get a copy of Clark's Prescriber. and that's Clark. I think it's spelled the British way with an E on the end, but I'm not sure. Clark's Prescriber is a very, very concise, easy to use, wonderfully indexed materia medica. So it helps you find the remedy that you need. I don't sell homeopathic remedies. I have no financial connection with anyone who does. I am not a physician. I am not a homeopath. But over the years, I've used homeopathic remedies with my family. And every once in a while, they really hit the spot. This may be one of those spots.
Your reference to vinyl records, Andrew, reminded me of my late mother, who, when she came across CDs, she would occasionally say to me, "Put one of the wee silver records on." Now, Diane's question, it just reminds me, Andrew, because she talks about enjoying your talk so much, but a lot of people have expressed thanks, but I'm obviously not going to mention everyone, but we do appreciate, and Andrew very much appreciates your kind words as well as your questions. And Diane says, I've also heard that some people who've done megadosing of vitamin C experience cataracts. Can you respond to that, please? And also whether there are vitamins you would recommend that might help with cataracts if you do have them.
Well, we'll take the second part first. If you have cataracts, I am not aware that there are any vitamins, or for that matter, any supplements beyond the vitamin family that will take care of it. If you find them, good, and let us know. But beware of people making claims. This is tricky. People ask about floaters, they ask about cataracts, and I'm not sure you really can influence that very much. Most ophthalmologists will tell you that there's nothing you can do for floaters, but they tend to go away over time. Most people will tell you that cataracts are part of aging, but what cataracts are really part of is oxidative stress. Now, I had retinal surgery some time ago, and in the course of doing that, they use lasers, which is good, but they also have to do other things which are a little invasive. And what happens after you're done with that, and I was told this in advance, that you would have an acceleration of cataract growth. And that happened to me, and I had to have cataract surgery in that eye in a matter of months. Normally, it would take years, but because of the oxidative stress, because of the lasers and the procedure, the cataracts were stepped up. Some people think that if you don't wear sunglasses when it's very bright outside, whether it's snow in the northern climates when the sun is out, and you get snow blindness, which is a temporary diminishment of sight because of the intense amount of reflection from snow. Or if it's from being out on the beach, same problem, intense amount of sunlight. These things can probably accelerate cataracts, so sunglasses are probably a good idea. There are reports of people who take vitamin C who get cataracts, and there are reports of people who take vitamin C who find improvement. It's kind of ambiguous. I think I would fall into your group. I've been megadosing of vitamin C for a very long time, and I still got a cataract. But I don't think I got that because of a lack of vitamin C. And I don't think vitamin C prevent what be fair. When they're going in with the laser, can you really get enough vitamin C to that site quick enough to make up for that problem? The answer is no. And remember, that's not an idle statement, because one of the two places in your body where vitamin C is concentrated the most naturally is the eyes, the liquid of the eyes. The other is the adrenal glands. So maybe this is nature's way of saying vitamin C helps prevent cataracts, because in a healthy eye, you have lots of vitamin C there. Is it enough to make up for pollution? Is it enough to make up for oxidative stress from laser surgery or from exposure to ultraviolet light if you were a pilot? Notice how many pilots wear sunglasses? And there may be something to that. I have a pilot's license. My daughter does as well. She now has her instrument rating. And we invariably are going to be wearing sunglasses in the plane. When you put all this together, what you're left with is the best thing to do is to prevent. Well, duh. And that's an obvious statement, but let's not sell that short. I think antioxidants in general, beta carotene, selenium, zinc, vitamin C, probably vitamin E. I think all of these would help the body to resist or delay the process of cataracts. Cataract surgery's come a long way. Even in the professional career that my own ophthalmologist has, he was telling me how just in the last 25 years or so, there's been all these advances in cataract surgery. So that's the good news. Nobody wants it. I wouldn't say that I'm telling you to go out and get it, but I would also say on a scale of 1 to 10 for fears about surgery, this would probably be around the 2 or 3 mark. Fortunately, we have an available therapy that absolutely positively takes care of cataracts. Cataract surgery goes back, believe it or not, to the late 1700s, but you don't want to know about what they were doing back then, and you can simply stay with my previous statement. If things have advanced surgically now, where if you slow them down nutritionally with lots of antioxidants, good. And if you have to have the procedure, well, you and I both.
Laurie certainly is taking your advice on megadosing, and she wants a question. She has a question about getting to 16 or 20,000 milligrams daily of vitamin C. She says, I was using a dose of 4,000 milligrams 5 times a day, and then saw info about 2,000 milligram doses, and I started the smaller doses of 2,000 milligrams to reach 16 to 20,000 a day. Is there a lot of difference between 4,000 every 3 to 4 hours and 2,000 every hour and a half to 2 hours? And is it important to be consistent daily at either 16 or 20,000 milligrams? Or is it fine to vary between 16 and 20 from day to day? What if I have only 8,000 one day, or even completely skip vitamin C for a day or more? After having been using 16 to 20 for some time?
Well, let's pull the camera back and take a look at the whole planet for a minute. And the bottom line with vitamin C is you take enough C to be symptom-free, whatever the amount might be. No matter how you're doing it, if you are healthy and happy, and you're avoiding the need for medications and avoiding the need to go to the doctor for anything other than a checkup, you're probably doing it just right. The body's very, very flexible. Remember, there's people out there, brace yourself, there's some people out there that don't take any vitamin C at all. There's people in the world that don't take vitamin C supplements, and how they get through it, I will never know, because in many cases, their diets are the very diets that desperately need vitamin C supplementation. You're better off eating junk food, taking vitamin C, than eating junk food and not taking vitamin C. So the human body is rough and tough. And if you're in your 20s or 30s, you can go away with almost anything. When you get to be Michael's age, or if you really are an old guy, my age, then it's necessary for you to take stock of where you've been and think to yourself what the composer who wrote the Charleston Rag said when he turned 100. U.B. Blake was asked about being 100, and he said, well, if I had known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. So the best thing to do is to pay attention to what your body wants. If you are healthy and happy, you're doing it right. Is there a lot of difference between 4,000 milligrams of C every 3 to 4 hours and 2,000 every 1.5 to 2 hours? Is there a lot of difference? No. Is there difference? Yes. If you divide the dose, the more you divide the dose, the better it is. But this doesn't really enter in day-to-day preventive care. This centers in when you get into therapeutic situations where you're trying to get your C level a lot higher than 16 or 20,000. And then it's a matter of taking vitamin C very frequently. You may have heard me say that when I had viral pneumonia, I took 2,000 milligrams of vitamin C every 6 minutes I was awake. Now the frequency and the dose come into play, and you can see this in full flower. Is it important to be consistent? No. If you're taking C every day between 16 and 20,000 milligrams a day, I would say that is consistent. Okay, so now you're saying, what if I only have 8,000? That's still consistent, in my opinion, because you're probably well, or you would be taking more. Remember that animals make their own vitamin C, except for primates like the chimpanzees and the apes and humans and fruit bats and guinea pigs. Some animals can't, but most animals make their own C. I'm confident they don't make the same amount every day. They make more when they're sick, and I imagine under various circumstances, they might make more or less. But I don't think it's anything that you really have to be too concerned about. Many people are going to be in a situation when they're traveling, and maybe they're visiting friends or they run out of vitamin C. And if you have your level go down or you don't have any at all, are you going to keel over? No, you're not. You're just not. You'll manage it. How do I know that? Because look at all the people that don't take any at all, year after year after year, and somehow most of them are still on their feet. So it's a good question, but the overall answer is keep it simple. Take enough C for you to feel well. Divide the dose as much as you have to do so you don't have to be living within 20 feet of the bathroom. Take enough C to be symptom-free.
Now, Laurie adds, I'm 48 and a half years young. Magnesium in the past alleviated many, many magnesium deficiency symptoms for me. Magnesium for the past several years, even in small amounts, dehydrates me. My serum level is normal, but at the lower end when I don't supplement. What can I do to get in some magnesium and ease the dehydration that accompanies it? Might zinc be related? I've been testing low for alkaline phosphatase liver enzyme for a while. My limited understanding is that alkaline phosphatase is cysteine, zinc, and magnesium. I've supplemented with zinc in the past, but maybe not enough. And I've recently started zinc glycinate, 20 milligrams twice daily. Might vitamin D also be related? I think I've consistently tested in the low 40s when 90 is optimal. Despite 5,000 IUs of D, lanolin form, daily for a couple of years, and 100,000 IUs of lanolin weekly for several months. I felt really sick with 100,000 IU, and 800 milligrams of magnesium twice daily was required to alleviate magnesium deficiency symptoms. I've tried 6 or more forms of magnesium, and consistently I'm dehydrated with it. So what are your thoughts?
This is the first time I've heard of someone so thoroughly testing 6 or more forms of magnesium and having dehydration with all of them. And I'm unaware that magnesium is something that normally causes dehydration. So I don't know. You've probably looked at Dr. Carolyn Dean's book, The Magnesium Miracle. Dr. Tom Levy also has a new book out on magnesium, and you might want to take a look at these. Both Carolyn and Tom do have financial connections with supplement companies, but again, 85% of what they write is nonpartisan. So I would recommend you check with that. That's Levy, L-E-V-Y, and Carolyn Dean with a D, D-E-A-N. You felt really sick at 100,000 units of vitamin D. Well, yeah. That's an awful, and you should do that. And doctor prescribed it, and you had an overpoweringly good reason to take it. And if you did, for a very short time. But I don't know anyone that needs that much unless there is some kind of clinical specific problem. So your D is in the low 40s. Is 90 optimal? No, I think 90 is a lot higher than necessary. There are people who will tell you that you need more or less D, but the low 40s is certainly not bad. I would suggest you go to SUNARC, S-U-N-A-R-C. That's Dr. Bill Grant's vitamin D website. And there's also Vitamin D Wiki. And there's also a couple of other good vitamin D sources on the internet, and they'll walk you through that one. You are getting tested, that's good. So you know that 5,000 units is going to get you into the low 40s, but 100,000 units makes you sick. So I think we can say, like a good pilot would tell you, fly over the mountain, but under the stars. And you don't want to be too low or too high. You're going to have to find this level yourself. And the simplest thing to do is continue to be tested and find where you want to be. If you want a specific number, then you just supplement until you get there. This may take a while. As far as the connection with zinc, again, I'm not aware that there is a specific connection there. I wouldn't rule it out. I'm learning all the time. But what I find particularly interesting is you mentioned that you take magnesium because it helped you so much. It alleviated many, many magnesium deficiency symptoms, which is good. You've been taking it for several years, but it dehydrates you. Your serum level is normal, but at the lower end when you don't supplement. So obviously you should be supplementing, but then you have this dehydration. I'm wondering how you know you're dehydrated. Are you thirsty all the time, or are you actually doing the pinch test where you grab your skin in the forearm, you grab that and pull, and if it does not spring back, you're dehydrated? That's what the nurses used to do before the advent of high tech. You might even want to talk to your doctor about that. Perhaps there's some way that you can have this monitored. I don't know. The first thing I would do sounds kind of silly, but I would say that if you're dehydrated, drink more water. Not bad advice, really, because a lot of people really don't drink enough. President Ronald Reagan's personal physician, Dr. Ralph Bookman, told President Reagan that he should have 10 glasses of liquid a day. Now, Dr. Bookman didn't care what that liquid was. It could be coffee, it could be soft drinks, it could be anything at all, but 10 glasses of liquid a day. If you are a Richard Simmons fan and you've watched his exercise videos, of which there are many, Richard Simmons is constantly telling people to drink more water. And if I remember correctly, in his diet program, he recommends 8 glasses of water a day. Now that's 8 ounces in a glass. 8 times 4 is 32. 32 ounces is a quart. That's half a gallon. That's nearly 2 liters of water a day. A teacher, a classroom teacher, and I've been there and I can verify this, will lose 1 liter of water a day just talking. So our need for water is always there, and you might need more. I don't know, it's a guess. But I would say you can't go far wrong trying more water. It's difficult to do yourself an injury by increasing your water intake. And I would say follow Dr. Bookman's advice. You might be surprised. You might not be drinking enough. It just seems weird to me that any form of magnesium would cause that dehydration. And you're not really taking enormous doses. Let's see, you actually specify that you are taking 800 milligrams of magnesium twice daily. So that's 1,600 milligrams of magnesium, which is kind of a lot. Most people would have loose stools at that level. I wonder if you did. Of course, if you had loose stools, even that could cause a little bit of dehydration. The RDA for magnesium is around 350, 400 milligrams a day. So 800 milligrams twice a day is about 4.5 times the RDA. It's not a ridiculously large amount, but in many people's cases, it would be a laxative. There's one other thing you could do. You could sidestep the whole issue by trying Epsom salts baths. Epsom salts are made of sulfate. It's not expensive. You take a lot of this. In a bath, you put in about 1.5 cups of Epsom salts and a nice warm bath, and you can make it hotter once you get in. And that's what I do. And I just love that. Magnesium sulfate is absorbed through the skin, not all of it, of course, but you are going to, I think, have a very pleasant time with an Epsom salts bath. And I'm going to guess that sitting in a tub, you're not going to dehydrate. So there's another angle that you can try. If you're concerned about too much vitamin D, we've already talked about that, get tested. But remember that in addition to supplementing, you get out and play. You get out into the sunlight. Summer's coming. At least we're recording this now in mid-March. So you have opportunities to get out into the sun. This is an area that, again, is new to me. So your experience, I accept it. I don't deny it. But let's see if trying these simple tweaks can make the difference.
I speak as someone who'd never had an Epsom salt bath until Andrew advised it several years, 5 years ago. I enjoy them immensely. I aim to have, and I use my diary to remind me, twice a week I aim to have a magnesium bath. And yesterday I did a 14-kilometer walk followed by a 50-kilometer cycle. And I had a glorious magnesium bath last night because I think it's great for aches and pains, and just you feel wonderful after it. So thank you for that, Andrew. Now, Hannah has a question about depression in the neuroinflamed. She says, I have chronic subclinical Lyme disease, no IgM, borderline IgG, but a FISH test positive 10 out of 10 for 5 Lyme and co-infections. This is giving me a lot of neuroinflammation and repeated episodes of severe depression over 20 years, with or without anxiety, and lately made worse by PTSD. What vitamins and nutritional elements can help kill Lyme disease, the Epstein-Barr virus, and heal chronic neuroinflammation of the central nervous system? Niacin and high-dose vitamin C give immediate relief, but any other advice? And do I have to avoid sulfur? A thiol-free diet is being recommended for the neuroinflamed. May I take sulfur-containing amino acids such as SAMe, given that I am neuroinflamed? SAMe was working miraculously for a year and a half, but I stopped it because the depression was persisting at the time. I was forgetting methylation cofactors, so that may explain it. And how much niacin would be too much in this case?
Well, there's a lot in this question. In fact, to call that one question is a gracious way to handle it, I think. So we will deal with these 12 questions as best we can. First of all, I'm not a physician, I'm not a neurologist, and I am not, unfortunately, the oracle of all medical goodness. But I can tell you that the first thing that just jumps out at me from your question is how you've answered it already. Niacin and high-dose vitamin C gave immediate relief. Right, and that is exactly what I would recommend for any kind of inflammation, anything at all that's that chronic infection, the type of thing they give these various drugs for, they don't really have an answer for. They pull out the steroids, they pull out the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. Anytime that rears its head, it usually suggests that more vitamin C is going to help. And the beauty of it is it did. You took it and it helped you. Now, anytime there's depression, Dr. Abram Hoffer taught me the go-to thing is niacin, also for anxiety. Isn't it odd that niacin can help anxiety or depression? And the reason is it's not a drug for either. It is a nutrient for both. It helps your body normalize and balance. Niacin is not a drug, it's a vitamin, and your body is capable of overcoming either extreme when it's fed right. This is coming out a little simpler than it really is, but the basic point here is you've got it. By using niacin and high-dose vitamin C, it gave you immediate relief. Well, in that case, I would say back that horse. If Seabiscuit is winning every single race, I'd put another $5 on it. I just would keep betting on the horse that's winning. And this is what I would say. The second thing is methylation is something that gets a lot of attention. Dr. Abram Hoffer said to me that it is clinically unimportant. There's a lot of theoretical stuff in nutrition that doesn't actually pan out into significance in everyday life. And although methylation is not to be ignored, if you know from having tests and working with your doctor that you have an issue there, then it's time to talk about it. But I think a lot of people are fretting that they're over-methylating or under-methylating, and they start to get concerned where they don't really need to be. So I would say that if you're taking niacin and it's working, you're doing it right. If you're taking vitamin C in high doses and it's working, you're doing it right. Not only does vitamin C relieve inflammation, but vitamin C also helps to improve mood and relieve depression. And that's because when you digest phenylalanine, and you break it down into its various products, vitamin C is involved in that sequence. So vitamin C is sort of an antidepressant. I have more on that at dryourself.com. If you want to just go there and do a quick search for depression and join all the other people that have, because that's one of the most searched for topics at my website and has been for 22 years. My depression article has been peer reviewed, actually by Dr. Abram Hoffer himself. So that will give you some balance there as well. Our book, Niacin, The Real Story, is also likely to be helpful to you, and you can see more about the ins and outs of niacin. With vitamin C, I co-authored a book with Dr. Steve Hickey called Vitamin C, The Real Story. So there's vitamin C, The Real Story, and niacin, The Real Story. And I would recommend those books to give you more details for this. Protein contains sulfur. Amino acids contain sulfur. That's how they got their name. So an amide group actually has nitrogen in it, but you will find that if you take a look at this, sulfur is important, and a lot of people aren't getting enough of it. If you do an internet search for sulfur, you'll find there's a lot of references that people maybe need more of it, and some people think you should supplement. But you also can simply have more of the cruciferous vegetables. That's the cabbage family: cauliflower, broccoli, kale, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and such. And it can be any kind of cabbage, by the way. It doesn't matter if it's curly or red or whatever. I am unaware that anyone should stop having those foods, and they contain sulfur. So I doubt if there's, again, any clinical significance here. I am concerned about your having severe depression with or without anxiety, and the post-traumatic stress disorder as well. And I hope you're working with a physician on this, and I hope the physician is open-minded enough to allow for niacin. Making sure you have the entire B complex, not just niacin, is crucial. I recommend a B complex vitamin with each meal. And if you're taking a multivitamin with each meal, which I also recommend, you'll get even further by having your B complex between the meals. So you can have a multiple with Bs for breakfast, then a B complex mid-morning, then a multiple at lunch, then a B complex in the afternoon, and then a multiple at dinner. Spreading out the water-soluble vitamins gets you much more. It's not how much you take, it's how often you take them. With the B complex, frequency is very, very important. So having B vitamins 5 times a day is tremendously better than having B vitamins once a day. You might even have noticed, because you indicate that you got immediate relief. You might have gotten immediate relief, but it didn't take because you weren't dividing the dose and taking it all through the day. So that's the thing that I would look at first. I think that's perhaps the most important thing to underscore. Enough of the B vitamins and C, but divide the dose all through the day.
And question 13 from Hannah is about repairing immune system breakdown with vitamins and nutrition. 20 years ago, I took 3 tropical vaccinations at the same time: hepatitis A and B, typhoid and yellow fever. And my immune system broke down. I was permanently ill with flu, strep throat, pneumonia for 10 years. I cured it with a natural antibiotic antiviral, colloidal silver. In 2012, I had another typhoid vaccine with tetanus, and the same thing happened. Both times, I also ended up in severe depression. Can you please advise how to fix this type of immune system breakdown? Doctors diagnosed a C2 and C3 deficiency, phagocytosis disorder, and an unspecified cellular immune disorder, but they couldn't explain it or cure it.
Let's work backwards. Let's take a look at unspecified cellular immune disorder. To me, that sounds like we don't know what's going on. And immune system breakdown sounds like we don't know what's going on. And if you have vaccinations and it causes this trouble, and Lord love you, then you had them again, don't do that. I understand the situation, and I had vaccinations too before I went overseas. I had a yellow fever vaccination. This was many years ago. I wouldn't do it again. And if I had to get them, I just wouldn't travel. I know that sounds a little narrow-minded, but at this point, I've heard too many reports from people just like you who had all hell break loose when they had multiple shots, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So try to avoid that scenario if you can. It just isn't worth it. It's not worth having those shots if it's going to cause severe depression and immune system breakdown. Now, what can we do to fix that? Well, we've talked about depression, I think, earlier. But as far as the cellular immune disorder, there's this whole idea that your immune system has something wrong with it. There's something wrong with it. We need to give a drug. There's something wrong with it. It's also possible that it's starving. It's possible that it's malnourished. The first rule of building a brick wall is you have to have enough bricks. Doctors almost never consider whether or not you need higher doses of vitamins. And if you bring this up with a specialist in autoimmune diseases, they'll say, well, don't take those because that'll make your immune system attack itself with more efficiency and more power and more vigor. In other words, your immune system's broken. If you feed it right, it will attack itself even more and you'll get worse. That, I think, is wrong. Now, the reason I think that's wrong is because there's an awful lot of people walking around or trying to walk around with autoimmune disorders, and they haven't found a cure for one of the most famous, which is multiple sclerosis. Have you heard of a cure for multiple sclerosis? I followed this for decades, and every once in a while, there'll be this new drug that costs $10,000 a month or something, supposed to help, and it doesn't. I know people, I've had friends with MS. I've been following this since 1976. It's not a pretty sight. I don't take this mildly. I'm very, very interested in it. So when I found Dr. Frederick Robert Kleiner's protocol for treating multiple sclerosis and other similar illnesses, I thought this is interesting. If multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease, and maybe it is, and if nutrition makes an autoimmune disease worse, Kleiner should have fallen flat on his face when he gave enormous doses of vitamins to people with MS, but exactly the opposite happened. When Dr. Frederick Robert Kleiner gave huge doses, and I mean huge, 100 times the RDA of thiamine, for instance, vitamin B1, massive amounts of vitamins, massive amounts of B complex and vitamin C, and other things, he found that people with multiple sclerosis had improvement. They had a slowdown of progression of symptoms, or he was able to arrest it, or he was able to reverse it. Now, it is almost heresy to say that, and that's why I'm going to send you to Dr. Kleiner's own words. At dryourself.com, I have Dr. Kleiner's complete protocol for treating multiple sclerosis. It is lengthy, it is detailed, it is written primarily for physicians, but I honestly do think that if you read through this, you will gain enough ballast there to be able to look into this and maybe even try it out. So at dryourself.com, on the left-hand side, there's a vertical yellow column. Just go down that a little bit, just scroll down a little, and you can download this complete article, this protocol. And I'd like to thank the Townsend Letter for Doctors for letting me put that up there because they printed this some years ago. Kleiner used very high doses of the B complex. And both of your questions to me are pointing towards this as being a helpful answer. I don't know that. I'm a neurologist. Kleiner was a board certified chest physician. He wasn't a neurologist either, but he came into it kind of the way I did because he had friends who had the problem and he was able to help them.
Now, Stefan's question, what would you recommend to prevent hair loss and for improving hair growth? And you can even mention hair color if you want.
Well, Michael's setting me up. For those of you who don't know me, if you take a good look here, you're going to see that I have some dark streaks coming in my hair. That is not shadow and light. That is not makeup. That is not Grecian formula. It is not this spray stuff that the Ronco guy used to sell for your bald spot. This is actually recoloration. My hair is going from pure white, where it was in March of 2020, to this lovely silver color, which is not quite white. And you can actually see that gray, the non-gray area here. You see that? So thank you, Michael, for letting me mention that. My better half, it caught me on this. She brought it to my attention. She said, you know, you look so much better. And of course, I've been having massive amounts of butternut squash and massive amounts of kale and carrot juice and fiber and all kinds of good food, and, you know, taking my vitamins and exercising, taking my own advice, which is just a miserable thing to have to do. But the nice part is that it seems to be working. Well, why am I saying this? To soften you up for the blow. If you have pattern baldness, especially in men, but pattern baldness is usually genetic, and there's not a whole lot one can do about that. If I had the cure for pattern baldness, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I would be on my own private island on the Barbados, and you wouldn't find me on a bet. So no, there's no easy answer for that. Improving hair growth, the short answer is the B complex vitamins. How do I know that? Because in animal studies, if you make animals deficient in any one of the B vitamins, it is likely you will see some kind of deficiency in their hair growth, hair loss. Pantothenic acid comes to mind, but there are other B vitamins that are almost certainly involved in growing hair. Another thing is brushing your hair. Another thing is not shampooing as much. I've talked about this before, but if you have the seborrheic dermatitis or similar problems like that, the way I got rid of mine was not to take the oral antibiotic, not to use the topical antibiotic that the doctor prescribed, but I simply went down from shampooing every day, which I thought was the right thing to do, to shampooing once a week. And now, see that? So the problem went away. This is what happens when you do nothing sometimes. The human body is really quite remarkable. Think about it. Every morning you wake up alive. Now, all that work was done.
Long may it continue.
Yeah, well, it beats the alternative. But I used to say this to my students. I said, you know, you have homeostasis. The nature of nature is to keep you alive. And if that were not the case, you'd wake up dead. So every night, not only is your heart beating and the breathing is going on while you are sound asleep, hopefully, but all kinds of repair and regrowth and regeneration is going on. Dr. Deepak Chopra, an endocrinologist, observed years ago that the atoms of your body are 98% new every year. Now that is just wildly interesting. How does this relate to hair growth? Indirectly. The best thing you can do is to eat a really healthy diet and take your vitamins. And I brought in 100 butternut squash. That's a medium-sized dark orange winter squash. I ate 80 of those. I was juicing 5 pounds of organic carrots every other day. And I was juicing about 1.5 bushels of kale every week. I think that helped me a great deal. Come back when I'm 90 and we'll have more chat and see if I still have any hair.
Okay, well, in the short term, Stefan would also like to know, have you any recommendations for fighting recurring sinus infections?
Well, I do, and you won't be surprised, but one is take enough C to be symptom-free. Get that vitamin C level up to saturation. To me, that is the #1 thing to do. Next thing to do would be to get a neti pot. A neti pot looks like a small, almost comically small teapot. And you put warm, at body temperature, saline solution, weak salt solution, very weak salt solution in there, and then you introduce that into your nostril. Instructions come with the neti pot, or you'll find them online. It's widely used in India. And you can actually flush out and wash out the inside of your sinuses very carefully. Again, follow the directions. This is not for children. This is for people that are going to take the time to use it, but you asked, and I imagine you're of age or you wouldn't be here. So that may help you. The next thing to keep in mind is some people, and I know some people in my own family, they started humidifying their work and living space. So one member of my family actually has a humidifier in each one of the bedrooms of the house. And I think there's one in the living room as well. And reported that the problems went down, that having some humidity made a real difference for that family. Dr. Suzanne Humphreys has a suggestion. She told me this in person after a conference. We got talking and it just got so interesting. I think she was chatting for an hour about the use of sodium ascorbate. That's vitamin C that's non-acidic. And she mentioned that she found it was possible to take sodium ascorbate powder and introduce it up into the nose. And it was really good for various types of nositises, whatever they might be. And she was saying how well it worked. She said it felt a little funny, but it really did the job. So you might be able to try that as well. And finally, make sure you're getting enough beta carotene. That's in the orange and green vegetables. And that is converted by your body into vitamin A. Anytime you have a chronic inflammation of the breathing apparatus here, extra vitamin A is worth trying. And again, when you look into this, you'll find out for treating various illnesses, more vitamin A seems to be particularly friendly for the trachea, for the bronchi, and for the lungs. So I would recommend you get out your juicer and juice those carrots, or since I don't like juicing in the winter when it's cold, eat lots and lots of orange butternut squash. Sounds like an odd thing, but you asked me. And as I've often said, if you don't like my peaches, don't shake my tree.
Okay, Maria would like your advice on what can she do about hypothyroidism. Can it be reversed?
This comes up regularly. It's an important question. If you are on thyroid medication, which is usually how doctors treat hypothyroidism, hypo meaning too low, they give a thyroid extract or a thyroid supplement. That is not a bad solution to this problem. People that have had their thyroids damaged by radiation or partially removed or diseased usually are going to be on thyroid medication for the rest of their lives. But a lot of people don't have that problem. They have all their thyroid and they may have had illness, but nothing really dreadful. And they are low thyroid. That's not no thyroid, that's low thyroid. So if you're making too little, you're hypothyroid. And they can give you at least two types of medication. One is synthetic thyroid. That's commonly prescribed. And the other is natural desiccated thyroid. And you won't be surprised to hear that that's better, because it is. Natural desiccated thyroid is superior. The natural product works just as well, only better. And you can get that from your doctor, but have them specify that. And the phrase is natural desiccated thyroid. Any pharmacist can handle that. It's very, very easy to come up with. And if it's more expensive than the synthetic thyroid, it certainly isn't much more. Some people will tell you not to take iodine if you have low thyroid. Some people will tell you that you should take a lot. I think that middle, I think you need not a lot. What I do is I just paint my forearm with a little iodine once a week, and I let my body decide how much it wants. One lady who was on a low dose of thyroid medication for a moderately depressed thyroid found that when she changed her diet and went plant-based and had a lot of vegetable juices, that she was starting to have symptoms of overdose of thyroid medication, which means the doctor could take her off it and she no longer needed it. Now, admittedly, she was on a very low dose, but when she changed her diet for the better and got juicing, she was having symptoms of an overdose of thyroid. The doctor took her off it. She was fine, never needed it again. She lived to be 93. A lot of this depends on just how bad the hypothyroidism is, which brings me back to where I started. Some people are going to need this pretty much forever. If you've had it taken out or if it's been damaged, you have to supplement with it. But most people are in a situation where they can at least have a therapeutic trial. A therapeutic trial of a better diet is always a good idea. I don't think there's a doctor in the world that would argue that one.
Now, Maria would also like to know your suggestions for anemia, chronic kidney disease, or acute kidney disease. Presently, she says there's continuous testing, and the nephrologist has not yet come up with a definite help plan. Is there anything you would recommend?
Well, I'm not a nephrologist, but I would recommend that you read the work of one, and that brings us back to Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. She is a nephrologist. She's board certified and her certification is current. She's also opposed to vaccinations and very outspoken on that. And she's board certified in internal medicine. And she's my go-to person for kidney questions. At dryourself.com, I have a protocol she wrote on treating whooping cough with vitamin C. I know this question is a long way from that, but the point is, when you read what she says about vitamin C, I think it will have application here because many nephrologists will tell you not to take vitamin C, that it will actually be bad for the kidney. This is dangerous ground. If they're saying that because they're concerned about oxalate formation, they're wrong. And I have a lot of information on this at dryourself.com. Just go there and type in oxalate, and you will see what Dr. Robert Cathcart and other physicians have to say. And I have an article or two on kidneys and kidney stones. So the fear that vitamin C is going to cause a kidney stone is the worst possible reason to stop someone from taking it. I think a lot of kidney disease is caused by protein overload. That's one of the reasons I'm so concerned about people that get on an Atkins diet or even a paleo diet for a long time. I don't deny that both paleo and Atkins are both far better diets than a lot of people have. And I admire the fact that they are trying to get people away from junk food and get them away from sugar. There's a lot of wisdom there. But I also think that some people take this the wrong way and they start eating an awful lot of meat. And this causes an extra strain on the kidneys because you have to excrete those nitrogenous wastes. Remember what I said earlier about the amide groups and the nitrogen in amino acids, hence the name amino acids. I mentioned it in regards to sulfur, which is also in proteins. But if you have a lot of meat, a lot of protein, any kind of protein in excess, it makes the kidneys work harder. The first nutrition textbook I ever taught out of way back in, I guess it was around 1991, had a subsection called the Aging American Kidney. And it specifically highlighted overload of protein. So there's something you can do while you're waiting for the nephrologist. You can cut your protein intake way down. I would also urge you to read Dr. Humphreys and do an internet search for her. And I think her website is drsuzanne.net. And I would recommend that you make sure that you're taking vitamin C and the B complex. I recommend them a lot, but that's because they're good for so many things. Kidneys, I think, benefit particular.
And we're back to C and niacin to finish off with a couple of questions from Tatiana. First one is how to take several dosages of water-soluble vitamins on intermittent fasting. I would essentially skip breakfast and eat within a 7-hour window. If I want to take niacin 3 times a day after a meal, but I'm only eating 2 meals, what do I do? Want to take vitamin C 5 times a day, but I read somewhere that it's best to take vitamin C about 20 minutes before a meal. So what's your advice?
You can set aside the point that supposedly you're supposed to take your vitamin C about 20 minutes before a meal as being any kind of requirement. It isn't. You can take vitamin C anytime you want. Remember, I took 2 grams every 6 minutes when I had viral pneumonia. The reason someone might urge you to take your vitamin C about 20 minutes before a meal is because you will have the C in there first. And then when you take your food, the food will buffer that and you might find it more comfortable. But you can buffer by having any food or any water anytime or a snack, or you can take a non-acidic vitamin C, such as sodium ascorbate. Don't be a legalist on this. I can just imagine animals stopping and saying to their liver, wait a minute, is it 20 minutes before a meal? Don't make any more C. You don't have to worry about it. With vitamin C, it's a matter of comfort. If you're concerned about taking C more often, you should take the C more often. And 5 times a day, I think, is exactly right. That's what I do, and that's what I would recommend to anyone. Breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, supper, or any other way you want to do it. Want to take niacin 3 times a day after a meal. That's a pretty good idea. Niacin you can take with or after a meal because you want to avoid the flushing. You'll still flush, but it won't be as much. So with vitamin C, take it anytime. With niacin, take it anytime. Except if you flush readily on niacin, taking it at the end of a meal, you'll flush less. Or use niacinamide, which almost never causes a flush, or inositol hexaniacinate, which rarely causes a flush. How to take several dosages if you're intermittently fasting? My answer, I wouldn't think twice about it. Why? Because I intermittent fast every single day. So I'm with you on this. Every single day, I basically don't eat. Let's see, when would it be? 12. I guess I fast about 15 or 16 hours every day. And it just isn't an issue, in my opinion. Comfort. If you need to do this or that, you can tweak it. Your body will forgive you.
Now, Tatiana seems to have a technique that I've never come across before. I put 2 grams of ascorbic acid powder far back on my tongue and immediately chase it with a full glass of water, tilting my head back 3 or 4 times a day. Is that okay? I won't burn my esophagus this way, will I? Or damage gums, teeth, as some powder inevitably gets onto them. What do you say?
Well, let's see. You put half a teaspoon, roughly, 2 grams of ascorbic acid powder way back on your tongue. Will that cause some of it to get in onto the tooth enamel? It might. Would that cause irritation of the esophagus? It might. But you don't stop there, do you? You then immediately chase it with a full glass of water. Now, in my neighborhood, we call that a rinse. And when I gave my children chewable vitamin C tablets, way back then, years ago when my kids were little, when we were still watching television by kerosene lantern, I would have them take their chewable Cs and then they would rinse their mouth out. So we'd give them the chewable Cs, which they'd like, and then they would look up and say, rinse. So if you rinse, and maybe rinse twice, I would say it's not much of an issue. But if you want to avoid the total issue completely, use sodium ascorbate. Sodium ascorbate is non-acidic. Sodium ascorbate is sodium, like in sodium chloride, and the business end of vitamin C, which is the ascorbate fraction. Ascorbic acid is hydrogen ascorbate. It's the same ascorbate unit, but it's a hydrogen instead of sodium. Well, it just so happens that hydrogen ascorbate is an acid and sodium ascorbate isn't. So sodium ascorbate on the back of your tongue, you don't even need to have the water. Remember, Dr. Humphreys was talking about putting it up in the mucosa of the nose. She said it's a bit of an irritant. I mean, you don't just shove a lot up there. You only put a little tiny bit. But she would mention how you breathe more easily. And she was telling me from her personal experience, and I have no reason to doubt. Plus, I've confirmed it by trying it. So she's onto something. Bottom line is this. if you're going to have vitamin C on your teeth and gums, use calcium ascorbate. And there's not a dentist that can complain about a little calcium on your teeth with a supplement, or use sodium ascorbate. If you have a root canal, an extraction, gum surgery, any kind of dental work, you can have a powdered sodium ascorbate or calcium ascorbate, introduce it right in here and mush that up a little bit, and that'll be fine. But you do not use ascorbic acid, because ascorbic acid can, with repeated use, actually wear down tooth enamel. You don't want that. So what you're doing, I think, would probably be fine, especially if you had more water than just 1 glass. But if you want to completely sidestep the issue, you can use sodium ascorbate.
Okay, well, that was our last one for this session. Andrew, thank you so much. And thank you, Megabit and Formula members. And I have to say, I've really enjoyed that today, because the questions have just been so varied and so good. And I really appreciate all you guys taking part, and hopefully you're continuing to learn a lot from the old master here.
Emphasis on old. Remember what Henny Youngman said years ago. And if you don't remember, it's time to refresh your memory. The guy went to his doctor. Doctor gave him 6 months to live. Guy couldn't pay his bill. The doctor gave him another 6 months. Yogi Berra, my favorite yogi, said, "It ain't over till it's over." Don't let anyone discourage you from improving your diet and taking vitamins and exercising and going outside to play. Don't let anybody stop you from doing common sense things that you know are working for you. If you're feeling better, you're doing it right. And if you're not, it's your body's way of saying, "Hey, sailor, you need to make some changes." Now, you can't win an argument with your body. So my suggestion is you go along with what your body wants, and you'll know you're doing it right, because you will feel good and your tests will also be better. And people will look at you and say, "Gee, you look better than you did a year ago. And your hair's starting to get darker again." It isn't just me, by the way. My mentor, Dr. Abram Hoffer, reported the very same thing. When he was in his 50s, he said his hair went gray, and then he really made some changes in his diet and nutrition, and his hair turned back brown again. And then about 10 years later, it went back to being gray or white.